Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Twist,
Here.
Mrs. Oda,
Here.
Mr. Clark,
Here.
Mrs. Snee,
Here.
Mr. Kendall,
Here.
Mr. Swazer,
Here.
Mr. Tremblay,
Here.
Mr. Heath.
Here.
All members of council are present.
Tonight, we welcome members of the Troy Foundation, Mrs. Melissa Kleps and Mr. Arthur Haddad, who have a presentation to make. If you'll please come forward to the microphone.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Arthur Haddad, 843 Crestview Drive, Troy, Ohio. I'm here this evening representing the Troy Foundation. With me is Melissa Kleps. Melissa is the Executive Director of the Foundation. Another member of the Foundation is also in attendance this evening, Don Robinson. Madam President, Melissa has a press release and other information to be distributed to council, to the mayor, other members of the administration, and the press. How do you prefer that this be handled?
If you'll please give that to Mrs. Knight, when Mrs. Knight can see that that gets distributed.
Okay.
Thank you.
This year, the Troy Foundation is celebrating its 90th anniversary. This is 90 years of providing funds. These are funds donated by the citizens of Troy and others to improve the quality of life in our community, the Troy area, and to enhance education in our schools. Both the governing board and the distribution committee of the foundation discussed the appropriateness of a legacy gift in the city of Troy to recognize our 90th anniversary. The governing board requested the distribution committee to choose an appropriate gift. Since this was to be a legacy gift, the committee considered a gift commemorating the past while looking to the future. The Troy Foundation is presenting $80,000 to provide the funds to rebuild the lighthouse, which once stood on Treasure Island. You know, there are several significant landmarks in Troy, such as the courthouse, Hainer, the Masonic Temple, and at one time, the lighthouse at Treasure Island. In the past, Trojans flocked to Treasure Island to enjoy, among others, aquatic activities. The news release, which was prepared late last week, and the photos accompanying that reflect this past. And so, Mayor Mike, in commemoration of its 90th anniversary, the Troy Foundation presents this legacy gift to you to accept it on behalf of the citizens of Troy.
And on behalf of the City of Troy and all of us around this table tonight and its citizens, I would accept that legacy gift with a big thank you and humbleness of what you have generously given to our city today. But I listened to your words, and I would have to say that this gift demonstrates to all the people in Troy, the Troy Foundation's continued commitment for respect for the past, a look into, and you said, a look into the present and the quality that we have, but also looks ahead to the future. And we continue to appreciate what Troy Foundation brings to our community, and the commitment that you make on a day-to-day basis. Thank you for your support. It's kind of touching. For the past 90 years, in fact. And that, I guess I could say a few examples. The Showmobile was a donation, a gift. Our the Portable Comfort Center, which I know people have enjoyed, is a gift. And the many, many generous donations that you have made to so many organizations in this community. So thank you seems so small, but please accept that with gratitude from all of us. You will continue, I guess I'll use this since you, the gift, you will continue to be a beacon of light for all of us here in Troy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Our meeting then, Mrs. Knight, if you'll please read a summary of the minutes of the February 18th meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of Council, February 18, 2014, Committee Reports. Recreation and Parks Committee recommended legislation be prepared abandoning a small area of Haywood Park, which would revert back to the ownership of the Troy Board of Education. Resolution number R9 2014, support efforts to encourage regional sustainability, was given third reading and adopted. Ordinance number 08 2014, releasing mortgage lien for Fissinger Family Limited, was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 09 2014, authorizing the transfer of a small parcel of land of Haywood Park to the Board of Education, was given first reading and adopted. Following comments, council adjourned at 7:14 p.m.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as read. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Kendall to accept the minutes. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
We'll move on to committee reports, and I will begin this evening with the report of the Committee of the Whole. This was a request for additional police officers. Council met as a Committee of the Whole on February 18th to consider authorizing a reappropriation ordinance for the general fund in the amount of $168,230 for the purpose of funding 3 additional police officers in 2014, with the understanding that a 4th officer will be requested in the 2015 budget. This would adjust the level of the 39 currently budgeted officers to a total of 43 by the first quarter of 2015. We reviewed a detailed report provided by the police chief that included the history of the current staffing, summarized the staffing models he used to make his recommendation, the timeline for making appointments, and his recommendation. The city auditor advised that based on the final 2013 revenues and fund balances in the general fund revenue projections for 2014 and for the next 4 years, he feels the general fund can support the increased expenditure. The estimated 2014 budget impact would be $168,230. After reviewing all the information presented and considering the committee discussion, we support a reappropriation ordinance for the general fund in the amount of $168,230 to add 3 additional police officers in 2014, with the understanding that a 4th officer will be requested in the 2015 budget. We also understand that it is not necessary to immediately approve a reappropriation ordinance as it is early in the budget year, and there will be additional recommendations that may have further impact on the 2014 budget. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Alan Clark, Mr. Thomas Kendall, Mr. Bobby Phillips, Mrs. Lynn Snee, Mr. Brock Heath, Mrs. Robin Oda, Mr. John Schweizer, Mr. Douglas Tremblay, and Mr. William Twiss. Are there any questions from council on the report? Okay, seeing none then, our next committee report tonight is from the Community and Economic Development Committee and Chairman Mr. Bill Twiss.
Yes, Madam President. On February 25th, this committee met to review the recommendation of the Planning Commission that Section 2 and Section 3 of the Stonebridge Meadows Plan Development be approved. Both sections conform to the approved Stonebridge Meadows Plan Development they had previous. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared to approve Sections 2 and 3 of the Stonebridge Meadows Plan Development, and that has respectfully been submitted by Thomas Kendall, John Schweizer, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council members on this report? Thank you, Mr. Twiss. Mr. Alan Clark has a report from the Personnel Committee for us.
Thank you, Madam President. Provided for council approval is the mayor's request to appoint to the Troy City Board of Zoning Appeals Mr. Will Harrelson of 438 South Plum Street. This appointment will complete the unexpired term of Mr. Richard Klockner, who resigned due to health issues. If approved, Mr. Harrelson's term would commence immediately and terminate December 31st, 2015. We would need a motion and a second on the motion to approve Mr. Harrelson, and I would like to thank Mr. Richard Klockner for the time he has served the city of Troy. He's done a great job, and he's been a real asset to that board.
Are there any questions from council on the report?
So moved for Mr. Harrelson. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Phillips to approve the appointment of Mr. Will Harrelson to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twiss?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
The next committee reports tonight are from the Utilities Committee and Chairman Mr. Doug Tremblay.
Thank you, Madam President. On February 28th, this committee met to consider recommending bidding authorization for water meters and radios at a cost not to exceed $150,100. Commencing in 2014, Ohio EPA is mandating that no lead water meters be installed at the time the city needs to perform service on any meter. Funds were budgeted to implement a program to replace the water meters to meet the EPA mandate and to replace the automatic meter reading devices at the same time to minimize the possibility of inaccurate readings as the meters age. It is estimated that it will take approximately 15 years to replace all the lead meters in the city. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for water meters and automatic meter reading devices at a cost not to exceed $150,100. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Clark, Mr. Twiss, and myself as chair of the committee.
Are there any questions from council on the report? You may continue, Mr. Tremblay.
Thank you. On February 28th, this committee met to consider recommending a professional services agreement with RA Consultants LLC to perform a study related to regionalization and bulk water rates at a cost not to exceed $78,100. This amount exceeds the budgeted amount of $50,000 as the scope of services was expanded. It is anticipated there will be savings within the water fund through the year to offset the additional cost. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a regionalization and bulk rate study professional services agreement with RA Consultants LLC of Cincinnati, Ohio, as discussed herein, at a cost not to exceed $78,100. This is respectfully submitted by Mr. Clark, Mr. Twist, and myself as chair.
Any questions, council? Thank you. We'll now open the meeting to citizen comments. There is a 2-minute time limit at this point in the meeting, and Mr. Livingston is our timekeeper. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments pertaining to any of the agenda items this evening? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address before addressing council. We'll move on to resolutions then and ask Mrs. Knight to read Resolution R11, 2014.
Resolution number R11, 2014. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for water meters and automatic meter reading devices for 2014, cost not to exceed $150,100. This is a budgeted item to start this new program, and this is the first reading.
Are there any questions from council on the resolution?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R12, 2014.
Resolution number R12, 2014. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with RA Consultants LLC of Cincinnati, Ohio, for a regionalization and rate study. The cost of the study is not to exceed $78,100. This is the first reading.
Is there any discussion from council on the resolution?
Move to suspend the rules.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Tremblay and seconded by Mr. Kendall to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Move to adopt. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 010, 2014.
Ordinance number 010, 2014. Ordinance accepting the final plat of Stonebridge Meadows Plan Development, Sections 2 and 3, in the city of Troy, Ohio, and dedicating right-of-way. These two sections follow the plan that was filed. This is recommended by the Troy Planning Commission and first reading.
Is there any discussion from council on the ordinance?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Phillips to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes. Move to adopt. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
That completes the business portion of tonight's meeting. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
Just reminding council about filing financial disclosure statements, that's all.
Thank you. Mayor Beamish, do you have any comments for us this evening?
Well, thank you. Actually, just again, thank you to the Troy Foundation. Also, thank you to council for the not reappointment, but the appointment of Will Harrelson to the BZA. I agree with Councilman Clark. Dick Klockner is going to be missed, but issues have taken its toll on Mr. Klockner. Also, just last call, annual Mayor's Prayer Break Gathering will be March the 15th at 10 o'clock, different change of time, same venue at the First Place, and tickets are free, but they'd like to know if you're coming or not. And the Rum River Blend is going to provide the spiritual entertainment. Then my last comment today, again, we have received from the State Treasurer's Office, and I'm not going to read everything, but I will pass it around. But it starts with, it is with great pleasure that I, Josh Mandel, Treasurer of Ohio, extend my congratulations to the City of Troy for an honor of their city's bicentennial in the year 2014. All the bicentennial sponsors and participants should be commended for their contributions and commitment to the community and to this state of Ohio. Therefore, I send my congratulations to all residents of the City of Troy and hope that you enjoy your city's bicentennial and wish you many more years of continued success. I'll just pass it around so everybody can read the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chitterton, do you have comments this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one that relates to one of the items that was in your items of interest. And that pertains to the never-ending winter season, that even in March and with spring training underway and opening day just around the corner, just will not leave us alone. In your packet, you had a report through Friday that to date we have used 1,540 tons of salt. We do have several hundred tons left in the bins. And with any luck, we will last the rest of the season. As you can see from the report, we have spent over $140,000 in regular overtime labor, salt, and fuel. That does not include Sunday morning. We had a crew of 8 that was in for 6 hours, clearing the main and secondary streets, and we used another 70 tons of salt. Again, 45 to 50 hours of overtime, and as soon as we get that report, then we will forward that to you. But we're crossing our fingers. We're okay on salt. Our policy that's been in place for nearly a decade now has served us well this season more than previous. And so with any luck, this will be the last event of the season. That's all I have, thank you. No promises, no.
Mr. Livingston, any comments this evening?
None this evening, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Stickle, any comments this evening?
I have no comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there any comments from council members tonight?
No.
Mr. Kendall?
I also echoing Mike's sentiments to the Troy Foundation. Thank you. Growing up in Troy, the old lighthouse on Treasure Island was my first tetanus shot. It did get rusty in its old age then, but anyway, very fond memories over the years, going to my grandparents over on Water Street, and then heading down by the river and Treasure Island, watching the boats and sitting around on the island around that area, and also on the observation deck, which we used to have there too. So, in fact, if anyone recalls the last year we had the River Rock 1. If you recall, the logo on River Rock 1 was a lighthouse. So this is definitely something that I love, and thank you, because now you've made our logo a reality. So thanks.
Anyone else on council?
Madam President,
Mr. Clark?
unfortunately, I'm probably going to bring up a sad subject because we talked about having enough salt. I'm going to follow that up with the potholes, the perennial pothole question. I've had some concerns about some of the potholes around. Do you know when? I know, and I don't want to say this, whenever the guys get done plowing the snow, where they're going to start addressing the potholes?
Well, we've been addressing them since we've been able to get back down to asphalt. Actually, today they spent plowing the local streets. Tomorrow, since we don't have anything forecast, they will be continuing to fill new potholes. But keep in mind that they are using cold patch, which is just a short-term patch, and then we will come back and do, later when the asphalt plants, we will put in the more permanent fix. So they are doing that, they continue to do that, and if anybody sees any of particular note, then feel free to email me.
Do you have any idea when the asphalt plant will reopen?
They typically don't open until April, May,
Yeah,
but the cold patch should last until then.
it's been a tough year, man.
It's not over.
It's been a tough year. Thank you, Madam President.
Anyone else on council? Any members of staff have any comments this evening? Anyone else in the audience have any comments this evening? Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Have a safe and peace-filled week. Meeting adjourned.